May I welcome everyone to this seminar to discuss the situation facing the media in Southeast Asia. 1 year on from the military coup in Myanmar, which was February 2021, February 1st, and 3 months to the Philippines presidential election, May 9th. This webinar is hosted by Foreign Press Center Japan and sponsored by Sasakawa Peace Foundation. I am your moderator, Kimiko, Aoki. We have 5 leading journalists from the region today. I'll introduce them later, but first some housekeeping information. We are on the record and the program will be made available later on FPCJ online. Panelists today will speak in English, but there will be simultaneous translation in Japanese. So please, people who want to listen in Japanese, select the Japanese language with the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. That's if you want to hear in Japanese. The browser version do not support the interpretation function. So if you want to listen in Japanese, you do need to have the Zoom app. And this explanation is currently being translated. So please check you're hearing your language, the selected language. If you want to speak in, listen in English, you do not need to choose any language. And question and answers, please, the member of the audience, submit your questions and answers in the QA button, again at the bottom of your screen, anytime during the panel's speech and the subsequent discussion. But please note that we may not be able to address all of your questions. And please do include your name, your organization, and who the question is for. But first, I would like to ask Dr. Atsushi Sunami, President of Sasakawa Peace Foundation, to open this webinar with his opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Alex. First of all, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedules to participate in this webinar today. I'm Atsushi Sunami, the President of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. I'd like to say a few words before we begin today's seminar. Since 2019, the Sasakawa Peace Foundation has been working on a project to build and strengthen media networks across Southeast Asia and Japan, with the aim of promoting media coverage from a regional perspective and increasing collaboration among media organizations across national borders. In partnership with the Foreign Press Center Japan and 10 media outlets in the region, we invited editors-in-chief to meet in Japan. We also conducted a 2-week fellowship program for mid-career journalists from Southeast Asia. This project has resulted in the formation of a network of highly skilled media practitioners, including the speakers and moderator of today's program. We have also seen the publication of many articles featuring regional perspectives on common challenges in the region. Although we had to postpone these invitation programs due to the pandemic, we will continue to build even stronger and deeper media networks to increase collaboration between Southeast Asia and Japan. As part of these efforts, today's webinar aims to shed light on the current situation facing the media in Southeast Asia, particularly in Myanmar, nearly 1 year after the military coup d'etat seized control of the country, and the Philippines, which is about to hold the presidential elections. This event will also be an opportunity to discuss how media organizations across the region can work together to uphold and enhance freedom of speech and democracy. In Myanmar, journalism is under threat as media companies have had their licenses revoked and journalists continue to be detained. Mr. Aung, the founder and editor-in-chief of the Irrawaddy, an independent media outlet in Myanmar, will talk about how local media organizations continue to report about the situation on the ground despite these hardships. In Philippines, the next presidential election will be held in May 2022. At the same time, there is growing concern about the flood of unverified information online, causing confusion among voters. Ms. Chay, Hofileña, the founder and editor of Rappler, an online media outlet in Philippines, will discuss the current situation in the country. Rappler is also led by Ms. Maria Ressa, who has arrested and indicted under the current administration in Philippines, but was later awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in December 2021 for her efforts to safeguard freedom of expression, which is a precondition for democracy and lasting peace. As Ms. Ressa warned in her Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech, press freedom is essential to combat the current information ecosystem where lies containing anger and hatred spread faster in social media than the truth. Japan is no exception when it comes to the problem of fake news in the era of social media. On social media website, which allow individuals to communicate freely, unverified information and rumors can spread out of control, amplifying feelings of doubt, anxiety, and anger. In Japan, there have been cases of slander and defamation and social media, as well as the spread of disinformation about the coronavirus, for example. I think this is a common challenge shared by Japan and Southeast Asia. Ms. Ressa, in her acceptance speech, also said, without facts, we cannot have truth. Without truth, we can't have trust. Without trust, we have no shared reality, no democracy, and it becomes impossible to deal with our world's existential problems, climate, coronavirus, the battle for truth. Today, as we are facing these existential challenges such as climate change and pandemic, the meanings of freedom of speech and democracy is being re-examined. Further, as authoritarian countries to gain strength, not only in the Philippines and Myanmar, but across Southeast Asia, tightening restrictions on freedom of the press pose a threat to democracy. I hope today's webinar, focusing on the struggles of journalists, media organizations, will provide some clues and insights into how we can overcome the challenges facing democracy today. In closing, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to the speakers and the moderator of today's program and the Foreign Press Center for all their efforts in realizing this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sunami. So as Dr. Sunami introduced, we have 5 leading journalists from the region today. Aung, founder and editor-in-chief of the Irrawaddy; Chay, Hofileña, founder, managing editor of Rappler; Gwen, editor-in-chief and co-founder of Malaysiakini; Sothoeuth, media director, Cambodian Center for Independent Media; and Gwen, editor-at-large for Nikkei Asia. I would like to first ask Aung to speak about the situation in Myanmar. Aung launched the Irrawaddy in 1993 with a group of Burmese journalists living in exile in Thailand following the 1988 military coup in Myanmar. That was the first independent news media on Burma by Burmese, published in Burmese and in English. They opened an office in Yangon in 2012, but is now operating again from outside the country. Aung will tell us the latest situation in Myanmar and the state of the independent media and journalists in the country. Aung, please take the floor.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Thanks, SPF, for having us this wonderful seminar. Yes, as you kindly introduced why we set up the exile-based publication in 1993 in Thailand, having a lot of challenges and security risk both countries. After the coup in last year in Myanmar and Burma, I will use both Burma and Myanmar. Then we are back to square again. Back in exile and set up this publication. So I have given 50 minutes, it's very kind, and to talk about, to digest what happened in the country for last year. So many things happen every day and daily events, and we have no rest yet, but we keep feeding the information to our audience inside and outside the country, both Burmese and English languages. In spite of all the risk, we face, particularly those journalists and reporters inside the country, we continue to faithfully continue to provide fact-based information and verifying the facts from inside our sources, our news sources, our reporters taking the huge risk, keep reporting, and very brave. So let me start to say that one word, this is a moment in history in our country. One of the most surprising things, if you ask me, I find in last year, and because we are now turning into almost a year of coup anniversary. I think this is one of the most important elements I find is a civil disobedience movement, call it CDM. This movement is very important and formidable and a biggest threat and challenge to the military regime that staged an illegitimate coup. And second is PDF, People's Defense Forces, and they are sprouting around the country, and they are just a new groups, but they quickly arm themselves with their own funding and their support and fighting against the military regime. The third interesting element I find is that the diaspora movement. In 1988, when the students left, activists fled the country, there were little support when we arrived to the border areas. But today, last 30 years, we've seen a lot of Burmese have fled or left our work in other countries. There's a wealth, and then they become a professional. When the country faces such a crisis after the coup, these diaspora, even the Burmese living in Thailand and migrant workers, they have joined the fundraising campaign and click to donate campaign. There are a lot of, I think, support that they have generated across the globe to support this ongoing resistance, sustained movement to the people who oppose the regime. This is very interesting, I would say. And also I want to share a personal story that I have a photographer who worked with us last 2 or 3 years. And I lost him because of the COVID-19, and we had to lay him off because we couldn't afford to keep him in 2019. And then a few months ago, I had a connection with him. He's back, but he's no longer has a camera, but he has his AK-47. And his girlfriend saved the money and encouraged him to go to the jungle and to fight. And from her, he presented on board a second-hand AK-47, I don't know how, and I gave it to him. This is the story that I have to share with you, just to show that the resistance movement is going very strong. And second is that I had a mid-ranking businessman who has collected vintage cars and motorcycles, expensive motorcycles in his towns in the central Burma. Today he is in the jungle with his troops, and he has sold all his properties and his motorcycles or vintage car vehicles to whoever wanted to buy it. And then he set up his army. He set up his own army to fight against the regime. This is really interesting for me to see that this is growing resistant and people do not accept this illegitimate military coup. Another dynamic in that is we have almost 90,000, my estimation is 90,000, 80,000 troops. They are ethnic armies. We have a dozen of ethnic armies spreading around across the country in ethnic states. We call them ethnic EAO, ethnic armed organizations. The EAO and now the new PDF groups are collaborating and in many areas. And some of the EAO members have a very strong military capabilities. So these are the stories that we are trying to cover almost every day to tell the audience inside and outside of what is happening in our country. This is a new dynamic. And if you look at it, the military regime is so paranoid that even they try to stop this, even a silent strike. There was a silent strike in December, and we see that after the massacre in one of the cities, one of the township, and then the people public call for the silent strike. The whole country, cities and villages, no one came out. Everybody stayed inside the country, inside the houses for a few hours to show that they oppose this kind of brutality. So I think, again, this coming anniversary, the public and the campaign groups are positioned inside and outside, calling for the silent strike. The regime is treating this as a treason, a high treason. So they are coming up with a lot of laws to try to prevent this silent strikes movement. So I want to jump into, apart from that military coup and opposition, growing opposition, I want to jump into that economy and the poverty. And because of the COVID and because of the military coup, it is a very blow for the people. If you look at the COVID-19, since COVID-19, we have lost millions of people lost their jobs. Either they are leaving the country or already left the country. The prices of the essential foods and are gone skyrocketed. So many people in our countries, even in our hometown, are slipping into poverty, and they have facing food insecurity issues. I mean, if you look at the World Bank, and if you look at the World Bank, economy will grow only 1% and after plunging by 80% during the past 12 months, sorry. So economic conditions remain very bleak, and amid the escalating conflict and threats of a COVID-19 resurgence. So people inside the country heavily rely on the remittance, and a lot of people, young people, are leaving the country looking for jobs, looking for new greener pasture through Thailand, or either they go officially to Dubai and other countries looking for jobs. Even a mid-level businessmen or cronies, they don't feel secure anymore living inside the country because of the PDF or security threats. They also left the country or leaving the country. So if you look at it now, since the coup, we have almost 1,500 people killed and almost over 10,000 people being arrested, and a lot of people being charged. A politician, including a prominent leader, a government leader, or state councillor, Aung San Suu Kyi, and President Gwen being detained. And so what's going to happen? I mean, if you look at what is happening, and how the international community, ASEAN and China, India and Japan, how they are reacting to this situation, I think it's quite depressing. The world is so busy with the COVID-19 and their own domestic issues, or else with the Ukraine, and it become a much more inward looking. This is also something that I think Myanmar people or people in Myanmar are learning. They become more and more looking at themselves and finding their own way and their own remedy to treat this ongoing crisis. And that's why I think we see that the growing PDF, and I think hundreds of thousands of PDF are all across the country. And when we saw them many months ago, they started with the improvised homemade weapons they equipped themselves with. But now they have generate income, and they have started having more arms, more automated rifles, more deadly weapons, and although homemade mines to attack or resist or to defend themselves. And the brutal campaign, the airstrike, continue in a country. And I think this is where important to see that how ASEAN is going to respond to crisis. Last year, we saw that ASEAN leaders decided not to invite the Myanmar, the coup leader, to the ASEAN summit. And this year also, I think with the Cambodia as a chair, I think we will see much more interesting debate and I think much more concern, much more, I think maybe more importantly, there may be much more, I think intellectually a crack and a division will emerge, and probably there will be new policy going to shape in ASEAN because of the Myanmar issue. I think the Myanmar issue is going to and keep nagging the ASEAN's head, I think. And also China is important. China is still one of the most important I think investors and a key alliance of the regime in Myanmar. And China doesn't want to see the Myanmar issue to be internationalized. China is still very much concerned with the expansion of the Western influence in the country. And so China is the one key, and also Japan. Japan is Japan is a deep economic relation at times with the Myanmar and the military, and largest provider of the ODA assistance in the country. But Japan is concerned to us because the Japan is doing not much to share the pains and the sufferings for the Burmese people, or we don't know that what the Japan is going to do in terms of Myanmar issue. It's a very silent from the Tokyo. This is quite a disappointing to see that, I would say. And I would go into how the independent media is operating and working inside the country. And since the military coup, I think over 120 journalists arrested and also re-arrested. One of them reportedly died in detention center. Still, 46 still remain in prison, and then 70, I think more than 73, under 73 people are released so far. Most of the common charges are 505A penal code. It is a common writing that will cause fear, agitate the criminal offense against the government employees. So a lot of, since the coup, we became enemies of the state. We are treated like criminals. A lot of journalists have left. This is the photo that you will see that the raids took place at the Myanmar, one of independent news agency in Yangon. They all left the country, and one of them was one of the key leaders of the Myanmar was detained, and I think she's being released now. So a lot of journalists, reporters, including our staff, are either in hiding, moving from one place to another, one location, but they still keep reporting every day. They don't fear to tell the story to our readers and our audience inside and outside the country. That is very important. I want to share with you. And a lot of journalists, I think 60 to 17 journalists, reporters, we have over 3,000 to 4,000, I think, estimation about reporters living and working inside the country. And a lot of them also changed their career because of for living or the fear of being arrested. And also you can see that journalists, one journalist and media houses left. There's a vacuum, and the regime quickly jumping with a new group of reporters, so-called reporters, or I would call them defenders of the regime. They quickly set up the website. They quickly set up the Facebook where they trying to propagate and then spread the news. Like this kind of publication. They have come up with I think about 24 publications being supported by the regime and the military, and keep popping up and every day to dilute the news, to create the false stories, false news, fabricated news. But for us, it's not only the military, from both sides. We have to check and verify. We have to triple our work, doing our due diligence, because we want to produce facts, actual facts and information, because of not just the military alone. The military, the other side of the opposition, and even PDF or all kinds of opposition sites also, they also produce a lot of news that we really have to be careful and treat them carefully and verify all these sources. So lastly is the digital security, which is another, I think, issue that we have to train and talk to our reporters inside the country. And now there's a new cyber law is coming. Because of since the coup, we all use a VPN to get access to Facebook and other websites. Now the regime is coming up the new cyber law to jail anyone who are found to be using a VPN. So this is another threat that we have been facing. But one good news is our audience is not shrinking; it's growing. People inside and outside the country are trying to find ways to get information. Because since the coup, for a few months, the military had shut down the telephone lines in some areas. Even in Sagaing and in Chin and I think in some other states and regions where the armed clashes are taking place. In this area, still, I think the telephone lines are being still shut down. So I just want to say that this is a work, and maybe Q&A session I can elaborate more and share more with you. I think my time is up now. I just want to say with a few words, say that this military coup actually united the whole country, united the people, and then a unifying force. And the military has, the irony is, created this force to go against the military. So this is the thing that I want to share. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aung, for raising the issue of major countries' lack of attention and direction, and also the continuing brutal force, raise arrest against the journalist, vacuum filled with so-called reporters, defender of the regime, as you said, and the need for digital security. But the fact that the audience is growing and the journalists are continuing to report from inside and outside the country. There may be common factors and different factors. Our next speaker is from the Philippines, Chay Hofileña. She's an investigative reporter, editor, and an educator. And she's one of the 4 women who founded the Philippines Rappler. Her co-founder is, of course, as you know, the 2021 Nobel laureate, Maria Ressa. Rappler has just turned 10 years old this month. They are still fighting cases in court brought by the government while preparing for the presidential election in May, in which the late dictator's son is in the lead. Chay will tell us about the challenges facing the country's democracy and the independent media. Chay.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for that introduction. I just wanted to share with you the experience in the Philippines. The past 6 years, well, close to 6 years under the Duterte administration has really pushed back a lot of things, a lot of gains that we had made. And I will say the pushback has been in terms of democracy, in terms of the rule of law, in terms of human rights, and of course, even press freedom. And I will elaborate on that. We were actually looking forward to a new leadership given the coming elections, but the recent surveys are not very encouraging. Survey results are not very encouraging. So what we are experiencing, what we are seeing is a very, very divided country, unlike in Myanmar. There's factionalism across socioeconomic classes, and we're seeing a very painful and gradual decline in democracy. And we hope that we could address this before it is too late. So let me share with you first my presentation. I'm afraid I have to be given powers to share my screen.
is you cannot share. Organizers, can you check? Does it not come up, Chay?
When I click on share screen, I'm not seeing my tabs.
Oh, okay. Shall I try and share your screen?
Okay, all right.
Are you seeing this?
Yes.
Okay, so if you could tell me when to change the page.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
So I'll move on to the next slide. This is the current political landscape. As I told you earlier, just so you have an appreciation of what's going on politically, this is the big picture and this is the context. These are the survey results, the most recent survey results. This is as of December. If you look at the presidential candidates, the one leading is Bongbong Marcos. It's an incredible 53% voter preference. And second to him is a far 20%, the Vice President, Leni Robredo. Number three, tied at number three, is the Manila Mayor, Isko Moreno, very young, but very ambitious, very charismatic and very articulate. And then he is tied with Senator Manny Pacquiao, the boxer, the champ, also with 8%. And then another senator, Ping Lacson, at 6%. So single digit numbers. It's only the vice president who has hit double digit, but very far compared to Bongbong Marcos. Next, please. The big question for us in the media, in the local media, is will Marcos be disqualified? Because we're all shocked. Having gone through the Marcos dictatorship, and of course, martial law, the experience of martial law, and everybody knows about the horrible experience of the Philippines under Marcos. We cannot understand why he is leading in the surveys. So big question for us is, will Bongbong Marcos be disqualified? So right now there are several petitions that are pending before the Commission on Elections. So one petition is to disqualify him, to declare his certificate of candidacy canceled. And another one is pending with another division, still also in the poll body, seeking his disqualification. Process-wise, it can take some time. Elections are coming in May. We're already approaching the month of February. So the decision from the poll body has to come very quickly. If there is dissatisfaction about decisions at the division level, what can happen is that the petitions can be elevated to the COMELEC, the poll body's body where all the commissioners are seated. So this is the COMELEC and Bank. And finally, the final court of last resort, if there are still questions and appeals and complaints, these will have to go all the way to the Supreme Court. So big question is, what if elections are held and the case remains pending in the Supreme Court and Bongbong Marcos wins? What will happen? The thinking, the belief there is that if he is disqualified after winning the presidency, then whoever wins as vice president will assume the post of president. So for example, if his vice president at the moment, the daughter of President Rodrigo Duterte, wins as vice president, and she's in fact leading in the surveys, and Bongbong Marcos is disqualified, then Sara Duterte can become president. Next, please. Of course, one question is, how were the Marcoses able to resurrect their image in a country that has seen the evils of martial law? I think it is because really of disinformation. While we were all busy covering the drug war and the killings in the drug war in late 2016, Marcos went to work. His camp created troll farms. They infiltrated social media platforms. They went to Facebook early on, and I think we didn't really notice that they were already seeding false information, and that they were in fact distorting and twisting history. And this was very brazen, but no one was really looking. So the trolls started infiltrating YouTube, Facebook, and more recently TikTok. The word really that's very apt is infiltration of the social media platforms. And recently, in the past year, we saw, no, this is 2018. In 2018, we felt the pushback from civil society. In 2016, 2017, people were just stunned and were just quiet and silent, no? because of all the attacks, the killings that were happening in relation to the drug war, and the attacks, the verbal attacks, and the hatred that was just being spread on social media. People were afraid to speak up. But in 2018, I think people were emboldened and started to refute all these claims, and there was an attempt, I think, to challenge and to fight back. But Twitter has been one space where I think the supporters of the Vice President Leni Robredo have maintained their control. Unfortunately, compared to Facebook and YouTube, Twitter is really very small. But even then, the supporters of Bongbong Marcos have also, more recently, I think, starting October last year, we saw a proliferation of new accounts, newly created accounts, and long dormant accounts all of a sudden being active. And we know that this is in preparation for the May elections. Next, please. What are the lies that have been perpetrated on social media platforms? And this is major. This is the reason why the Marcoses, the horrible stories about the Marcoses have been forgotten, because what is being put on social media here, how do you explain the wealth of the Marcoses? Oh, they're not ill-gotten. They were given tons and tons, thousands and thousands of gold given by this supposed royal family. And so many people believe that myth, believe that lie. What else? Economically, the Philippines was the richest country in Asia under when we were under martial law and Marcos was the president, which of course again is a total lie. And then third, oh, there were no human rights abuses, there were no political prisoners, there were no deaths. Again, very brazen lies, because we know that there were a lot of political activists who were kidnapped and who just disappeared, and who were tortured and who were killed. And even if they've spoken up and they've testified, they've said, you know, this is my personal experience. These are the torture methods that I experienced, that the regime applied to thousands of political prisoners. Nobody believes them. And personally, it really remains a puzzle why this is so. Next, please. So what has happened? I think the social media influencers, the trolls, bloggers who suddenly attain a high premium or a high ranking on social media because of the number of followers that they have managed to discredit legitimate and professional media. Our credibility has been damaged considerably. We have been called biased. We have been called hacks, paid hacks, and they coined the word prostitutes, putting together the word press and prostitute. And they use hashtags. So whenever we come out with critical stories, they would flood our comment section and just spew a lot of hate and call us fake news and prostitutes. So, and if this is organized and this is state-sponsored and very, very systematic, it's very, very difficult for legitimate media to fight back, because we have to focus on stories. We have to focus on election issues, and we're not really trained to just fight trolls. It's a total waste of time and effort. Next, please. So besides the attacks on media credibility, these are the threats also that we've experienced. Red tagging. We thought in the martial law years, we thought, communism has been legalized under former President Fidel Ramos, but now it's a big thing. If you're perceived as being progressive, and if you are a journalist and you belong to what's called alternative media, which writes about issues that are socioeconomic in nature, which many times mainstream media are not able to cover with great depth, you are red tagged. You are tagged a communist sympathizer, or worse, a terrorist. So red tagging, and this red tagging is done by the military and the police online. It's not even done by anonymous entities. So we very, very clearly see that this is something that is state-sponsored. Second, and for red tagging in the past year, from June 2016 to April of last year, there have been at least 30 journalists and activists who have been red tagged. Second, there's harassment and intimidation online. What's scary about what's going on online is that it translates to actual violence in real life and on the ground. So for example, there have been journalists not based in Metro Manila, but in the provinces, where they're actually a lot more vulnerable than we are in Metro Manila. They've been red tagged too, and they've been identified as communist sympathizers. So some of them, there's at least 2 who have been arrested. One of them, and what was the basis for the arrest? Supposed illegal possession of firearms. So these are planted by the police. And so the harassment goes on, and a lot of political activists have also been killed. One of our human rights organizations has had, I think, at least 5 or 7 of its members killed under the Duterte administration. And then third, libel cases. So it's not just online, or the attacks are not just online, but they also go through the legal route. So libel cases, how many have there been filed? At least 37. Of the 37, 18 involve cyber libel cases. And then 8 of the 37 have already involved arrests. Next, number 4. So of course, all these will lead to killings. How many journalists have been killed so far? As of April 2021, 19. So you can imagine the fear and the chilling effect that this has on media, especially small media, small independent media organizations. Next, please. The pandemic has aggravated our situation. It has restricted our movement. It has made it difficult for us to challenge government data and statistics. A lot of the briefings are conducted online, I'm sure, just like in your respective countries. And it's difficult to ask follow-up questions because the questions are screened, and the moderator can just choose to ignore a journalist who has a tough question. And the the pandemic has made field work so much more difficult. We're restricted. We work, most of us still work from home, especially with the latest surge given the Omicron variant. And so now we're wondering if the pandemic will affect the voter turnout in May, because traditionally, historically, Filipinos love to vote. The elections are an exercise that they all look forward to. So on the average, there would be about 82% voter turnout. We don't know if this voter turnout will be sustained, it will be higher, or whether it will be lower in May this year. Next, please. So this brings us to the question of what can we do, given the similarities in our experiences and maybe slight differences also in our experiences. Offhand, very practical, would be coming out with quick statements of support, because at least media, like in our case, when Rappler was under attack, there were a lot of statements sent to different media, sent to government. And this made us feel that we were not alone and that there are other groups, media groups, who are watching closely. And I think even if they're mere statements, they send a very strong message as well to government and government officials. Second is to share each other's stories. Like I would have loved to be able to publish regularly about the situation in Myanmar, for example, or in Cambodia. But what we're limited to still now is wire reports. So there has to be a mechanism or maybe an avenue and a channel for sharing of stories. And then maybe to provide an alternative platform in case we are shut down. We don't know, given the change in government, we don't know whether things will get worse for the media or things will get better. Assuming worst case scenario that things will get worse and Rappler is targeted. Of course, this is part of the scenario building, that maybe at some point they will again try to shut us down. So it would be a source of comfort to find that we can send stories elsewhere, or of course there are other social media platforms that are available for these stories. Next, please. The international support is, in our experience, was also important. Maria had so many libel cases and she had to pay bail. I think if we alone had to pay her bail, we would have long closed shop, because the amounts reached really just in the millions. So the legal support fund was there, and there were donations and there were contributions from even ordinary people, ordinary individuals who cared about press freedom. And that really mattered a lot to us. And then next is also to connect to lobby groups. Again, besides just the letters, if there are lobby groups who can send letters and messages to their respective to our government, for example, then that will also send a strong message. And then very, very practical, a channel among us. How do we communicate with each other in the fastest way? It's always been through email or occasional panels like this, and it just takes time. So maybe there can be a mechanism again, an avenue that can be set up where we're all there, so that urgent messages and urgent stories can right away be disseminated and be shared. Then of course, there's a question, lastly, of legislation. How do we control disinformation? In the Philippines, some of our legislators have said that, okay, there's pending legislation. In fact, I think it's past third reading already. The point being, you cannot purchase SIM cards anonymously. You have to register your name and your phone number. Same thing, if you create a social media account on Facebook or wherever else, it cannot be an anonymous account. There has to be a name, there has to be a number. It sounds good on the surface. However, if the context of that is an authoritarian government, it's very, very easy to anticipate how that information and how that database can be misused and abused. So maybe the best way is still self-regulation. But yeah, there's still a lot of areas for discussion and even healthy debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chay. So Chay went on to discuss the possibility of areas of collaboration and coordination, but also she has pointed out the draining of resources as well as attacks online, physical threats, court cases, and the pushback of gains that had been made in democracy, rule of law, human rights, press freedom. These factors, again, could be common to, in some ways, to Malaysia. So our next speaker is Stephen Gunn. He launched Malaysiakini in 1999. It's the country's leading and the only self-sustaining independent news media, survived and thrived under pressure from Malaysia's successive authoritarian leaders. With audience in 4 languages, English, Malay, Chinese, and Tamil, and it continues to thrive. So Stephen, would you like to share with us your thoughts on what's happening in your country, how you see the common threads that ties with the other countries?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Good afternoon. I think while restrictive laws are the main focus in our fight for press freedom, I think Chay has mentioned quite a number of them. There are also other forms of control, and I think there could be through ownership of media organizations, cutting off advertising that many organizations, many media organizations rely on, among others. I think if you take Apple Daily in Hong Kong, for example, its publisher, editors, and journalists were recently all arrested. But what really dealt the death blow to the newspaper was the freezing of its bank accounts. That effectively forced the company to pull the plug, as it just could not pay the salaries of its journalists. So another insidious way of eroding press freedom is through the courts. And I think it's not just Malaysia, but many other countries in Asia face the same problem. Over the years, Malaysiakini has faced numerous legal actions in addition to the in-your-face harassment. That's beside the point. But in addition to that, you have court action against us in an attempt to punish us, and if not, to shut us down completely. We were the first media organization in the country's history to be hit with a lawsuit by a sitting prime minister. Najib Razak eventually withdrew the lawsuit only after he lost power. Currently, we are facing another lawsuit, this time from Najib's former deputy, the UMNO president, Zahid Hamidi. We are also facing 3 other lawsuits. The fate of all these lawsuits will be determined by the courts. Granted, all the judges do not agree with one another. Unfortunately, in Malaysia, you have many conservative judges who do not believe in the fundamental freedoms, like say, for instance, freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, freedom from fear. They are very much in the minority. An example is the 6-1 federal court decision in Malaysiakini's contempt of court case last year, where we were slapped with a $500,000 ringgit fine over our readers' comments, not any of our stories that we have written. I think that's about 14 million yen, I think. Now, a few months later, Malaysiakini was again forced by the court to pay another $500,000 ringgit to a gold mine for our reporting on the health concerns of villagers who were worried about the cyanide used by the company to extract gold. Now, we won that case in High Court. The gold mine appealed, and the Court of Appeal reversed that High Court decision. We challenged the decision at the Federal Court, which is the country's highest court. We lost. It was a 3-2 split decision. Now, what is interesting is the minority opinion. Federal Court Judge Harminder Singh, in delivering his opinion for the minority, said this in his judgment, and I quote, "It must be said, and this is beyond dispute, that the press and the journalists play a crucial role in reporting matters of public interest and matters of serious public concern. In its role as a watchdog for the people, the awareness created by such media reports will by and large lead to a greater protection of society as a whole. So long as the press holds a reasonable belief that the publication is in the public interest, or that the publication is a fair, accurate, and impartial account of a dispute, the press and journalists are entitled to the protection of the law," unquote. Now, unfortunately, only one other judge agreed with Harminder, while the other 3 judges argue that Malaysiakini had violated the rights of the gold mine. Now, like the contempt of court case, where we raised $500,000 ringgit in 4 hours, perhaps the fastest crowdfunding exercise in Malaysian history, we also raised the money to pay the gold mine from our supporters. And as a way for us to thank our supporters, we held a free premiere screening of the movie The Post 4 years ago. This is, some of you may know, starring Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep. The Post depicts journalists at the Washington Post who published the infamous Pentagon Papers, a set of classified documents on the US government involvement in the Vietnam War. The US government retaliated by filing a lawsuit against the newspaper. Now, at the tail end of that movie, Judge Hugo Black say in this landmark 6-3 US Supreme Court decision, I quote, "The founding fathers gave the free press the protection it must have to fulfill its essential role in our democracy. The press was to serve the governed, not the governors," unquote. We are not so fortunate here in Malaysia and in many parts of Asia, given that the majority in all 3 branches of the government, the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary, believe that the press serve the governors, not the governed, and that the press serve the powerful, not the powerless. It is incumbent on us to defend the free press. Despite the recent judgment against Malaysiakini, and I think there'll be many more to come, we shall continue to fight for press freedom. That's all I would like to share. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. So Stephen shared with us the use of courts to stifle and burden media press activities, but also the strength of readers supporting you. And that might be something you can share with others as well later. Our next speaker is Sothoeuth from Cambodia. He leads the media unit, Voice of Democracy, or VOD, of the Cambodian Center for Independent Media. He oversees the production of the Voice of Democracy radio programs and online news in Khmer and in English. The Cambodian Center for Independent Media, or CCIM, is an NGO established in 2007 that works for media development, including training citizen journalists and teaching media literacy. So too, would you talk about the situation in Cambodia, which is possibly as brutal as other tough countries, and also if you see common themes from what you heard from the others?
Okay, thank you so much, Kimiko. it was nice to listen to the experience of the situation in other countries in the region. And sadly, the situation here in Cambodia is not much different from our neighboring countries. And we are facing similar challenges like our neighbor here, they just mentioned. First of all is the media situation or the press situation in Cambodia is not much improving comparing to the crackdown on independent media in 2017. As you all might know, that in many of independent media in Cambodia has been cracked down, meaning that some newspaper were transferred the ownership to the government affiliate, and one of the oldest independent media in English language was shut down due to the tax issue. And then we ourselves, VOD, in the past, we also broadcast our program on radio, but it was disrupted in 2017. Until now, we have yet to continue the broadcast of our news program, but we got the chance to only broadcast other programs other than news. And I couldn't agree more with Chay that she raised about the problem about the discredibility, I mean the discredit of media or journalism due to the rise of, like, in Cambodia, maybe it might be the reason might be different from the Philippines. In Cambodia, we can see with the rise of social media. So the same, there are so many social media users, and also, like, we call a social media journalists who are not really professional. So they just dilute the information on the digital platform. And also, so make it confuse the people. And then when they read, they cannot distinguish between professional media and what we call a social media journalist. So they just don't lose trust in journalism somehow. And also with the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, unfortunately, it did not help, but it just like pull down the media in Cambodia. What I mean is that it's different from Myanmar, where when you face suppression, but you get more support or more attention from the people. But here, we, I mean, because people, they might be stressful, they may become stressed because they due to the lockdown and also the online work. So according to my observation, people tend to turn to more entertaining contents, leaving the social issue or political issue like from their mind. And so with this issue, it created another challenge for independent media. I mean, in getting the popularity or the attention from the public. And of course, the threat against journalists in Cambodia is also the issue that we are facing. In 2021, CCIM recorded more than 15 cases related to journalists. Those include the revoke of license, and also the arrest of journalists, and also legal action against them. So through all of this, it also, I mean, add more stress or add more burden to the journalists to what they already experienced from the crackdown in 2017. So we can see that now very few independent media in Cambodia remaining. And I think after the 2017, to me, there were three options for professional or independent journalists to choose. First one is to leave the profession because they could not find any the media outlet that they can work with, or they align or fit with their thought. And another option is to remain with the media, or they join the media that somehow did not fit what they want to do. And another one is like they're lucky enough to find or continue working with independent media, but those are very few. So in Cambodia, at CCIM, we are trying to train a new generation of independent journalists. But like I said, there are not enough independent media outlet for them to continue the profession. This is also another challenge here. Yeah. And also we are comparing to Malaysia, I think we are less lucky, or we are unfortunate that until now I can see that there are none independent media that can assist them by themselves, different from Malaysiakini, who are working in hardcore journalism, but you still can survive by yourself. But here, I think if you want to be self-sustained, you need to do in other fields, like maybe economics or reporting some entertainment. But if you are reporting about social issue or political issue, I think it is still very challenging here for you to survive. Yeah. And I think I will take 2 more minutes to present or maybe share my idea on like some possible collaboration. And I do agree with Chay about the regional support or collective voice to when we have some challenge, we should, if we can get support from our local partner and also regional and international partner. So this will be helpful. And then if independent media in Cambodia can get the support more from, all DP development partners, or especially if we get more support from our own public, that will be very helpful for us. But this is another thing that we have to work on. And then I really like about the idea of having information exchange hub, like we can share information or experience about what is going on in the region, and also other stuff. So I think I gone over time a bit, so I would finish here, and we can wait to listen to another speaker and discuss in the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, Sothoeuth. So to raise again common threats that journalists are facing in court, being arrested, but also the challenge of retaining the journalist working in the profession, and also gaining the attention of the audience, which is another very common challenge for all media, especially reporting hard news. So I would like to turn to our last speaker, Gwen Robinson. She is an experienced reporter, journalist, editor who has covered Myanmar and Southeast Asia, the region, for FT and Nikkei Asia now, and she's also a senior fellow at the Chulalongkorn University. So she has a wide view of the region, and I would like to ask Gwen what maybe about Myanmar, and also including Thailand, which is a tough situation as well, and the whole of Southeast Asia. What, from your view, what you see that you might want to add to the others, what others were pointing out, and also what to work on. Gwen, thanks.
Oh, thanks very much, Kimiko, and thank you, SPF, and everybody for arranging this very meaningful discussion. Actually, I think you also were thinking I could focus a bit on talking about collaboration or ways that media can help each other tackle some of these issues, very important issues that have been raised. So I thought I would just mention Myanmar and perhaps Thailand in the context of that. And I thought Aung covered the issues in concerning Myanmar brilliantly, but I have other dimensions of the Myanmar crisis that I see as actually in some ways there's some good things that came out of it for media and all the lessons we're learning from watching what's happening in Myanmar. Also in Thailand, number one, I think what we're really seeing is the also highlighted by these experiences of Rappler and Malaysiakini, and also in Cambodia, is the weaponization of laws. And really, Thailand is perfecting this right now. You know, just in the last few weeks, we've had new bills, draft bills presented that include a new media law, which is, you know, the big joke is it's aimed at turning journalists into PR people for the government. It's actually quite blatantly restrictive. And second, obviously, we all know in Myanmar the laws are being used completely unjustly, and it's hard to take those laws seriously. So really, I think one of the best ways, I think, that other media organizations and people wanting to help media in this region could help is really to ensure and fund and improve the quality of legal assistance. This is the new battleground, I think. It's both, as Chay mentioned, the amount of money you've been paying on bail. So that's one need for funds. But I think this problem, particularly we're finding with Myanmar journalists who have fled to Thailand, there's a lot of media in Thailand from Myanmar, and they need legal help, not only for just their whole legal status, but I think also in Thailand, the journalists need help to fight legal cases. So I would make a strong point about that. Secondly, when I said that I thought there were some good points coming out of Myanmar, I think for the first time, really, and I've been in this region a very long time, I think even a little bit longer than you, Aung, because I'm older than you, but I think we're seeing some kind of extraordinary solidarity in the region, because although there have been shocking events in the Philippines and Cambodia, truly shocking, but Myanmar really galvanized the horror of the whole situation. And I think a lot of media organizations wanted to help. So at the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand, I was just finishing my presidency at the time. I'm now a board member, but we all rallied together and I think really pushed to get press clubs of the region to sign up. In fact, we even got FOCAP in the Philippines on board. Cambodia, the Foreign Press Association. I don't think we found one in Malaysia, Stephen, but we did have Indonesia, Taiwan, I mean, all throughout. So a lot of these organizations wanted to sign joint statements, which doesn't cost anyone anything. And I thought really helped the beginnings of, I think it is a big problem. And this is partly the collapse of CEPA, I suppose, although CEPA didn't ever really draw together both foreign and local journalists in the region. But this kind of foreign correspondence and correspondence association mechanism was good. And I think it's actually spawned some collaboration. We've had Foreign Correspondents Club in Japan raise funds and send them to our media fund and various other things. So I would say that's one silver lining in the very black cloud in Myanmar. A lot of solidarity for Myanmar media, also supporting these kind of programs of not just support, but training programs, and huge emphasis now on cyber security. And as we've just seen, VPN has been outlawed or is in the process of being outlawed in Myanmar, but for a long while in the last year, I think a lot of money has gone into supporting VPN cards or VPN accounts for journalists. So these are some of the practical ways I think can help. I've got some other thoughts on trends, but I'm very mindful of the time. So I wonder how I'm going and if I could have a little bit more time. The other, I think one trend, I don't think you've gone into this, Aung, but I was really struck in watching Myanmar over the last year, how this massive crackdown on internet has actually sent people back to old ways and old days, meaning analog media. So I could see this amazing growth of these little mini newspapers that were actually being, you know, either printed out on computer and photocopied and handed around. And also some groups started this SMS news services being sending over mobile phones just as text messaging, but almost mini, you know, a string of headlines that would go out over SMS. And then of all things, the comeback of shortwave pirate radio. And several groups have set up, someone's done a couple of FM radios, and I think there's one shortwave radio project being worked on. So, I mean, these are all relics of the 70s and 80s, and I think we all thought we'd moved beyond that and photocopying little papers and working on radio. But in fact, the radio thing was ingenious, because that's something that, you know, even at the lowest level, you can buy a radio for $1 in some markets. So I thought that was just a little upside that came out of this terrible situation in Myanmar. So, you know, I don't know if that leads to any bigger point, except to suggest that I think any of us involved in associations or organizations should, I think, strive harder to, you know, get funds together and target issues. We built on the Myanmar issue after we got groups together to comment and issue statements on Myanmar to start. I mean, we put out statements on the jailing of a lot of independent bloggers and journalists in Vietnam, and there was support to do that. We've put out several statements on the Philippine situation, Rappler. I think we also did about Malaysia, Stephen, and definitely about Cambodia. So the problem, I think, with journalists is we're all so busy that people don't really have time to follow through and spend a lot of time writing for things that are not your direct work. So it does require time and energy, I think, to run things. And we're lucky in Thailand to have one of the largest and oldest surviving foreign correspondence clubs in Thailand. But I think smaller countries, it's very hard. So I might just leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you, Gwen. So I think Gwen raised the possibility of international media and international organization and local organization connecting together and working together more, as not just the sort of thinking about the regional collaboration. There's a international, regional and local organization that can come together. But because you really talked about Myanmar, and there are a few questions from the audience about Myanmar, I would like to turn to Aung again. What you would like to say in response to Gwen's ideas and suggestions, but also there is a question from the audience. Mr. Mukai Takao wants to ask, are there international media inside Myanmar, and what are they doing? Are they covering all sides? So Aung, would you step up and?
Yes, I will unmute.
Thanks.
I just want to say that, you know, I think Gwen raised issues, very important issues, the upside. And also here, with that, I just look at a message came from a friend of mine in Yangon. There is a collaboration between the Thailand National Press Council, and which includes some prominent members, journalists from Thailand. Some of them are our friends. And with the Myanmar Press Council, which is now operating under the military regime, which is not trusted by a lot of people. So if we talk about the collaboration, I think Gwen put it in a very, I think pointed right direction. But I think we also need to look out those Thai Journalists Association and the Myanmar Press Council who are just come up with a nice picture here and having a
got it.
conference.
Yeah.
Having a conference. I'm sure that international donors supported the Thai Journalists Association and Thailand Press Council. But those, our friends in Thailand are collaborating with the regime control Myanmar Press Council. I think this is something that we should really watch out and look into it, is to investigate further. So that this is something that I want to raise. Second is yes, there are some foreign owned media keep operating or allowed to operate inside the country, namely RFA, Radio Free Asia Burmese Service, BBC Burmese Service, and VOA, Voice of America Burmese Service. They still can continue to be based inside the country and keep open in the bureaus. But Ministry of Information, they're very clever, and they have reissued the reporting license, and so that journalist license, so they can continue to work inside the country, but under the guidance of the Ministry of Information and military regime. So they really have to be careful how they're going to tailor their story, what story they're going to tell. At least they have to compromise. They have to think of the conditions and the environment and the pressure that they are working inside the country, but they are allowed to go to the press conferences held by the military regime. And because the military is clever, that they are not allowed to use, the ministry are not allowed to use the Facebook. So the regime spokesman or Ministry of Information, they use those media to publish their side of the stories. Not just only the foreign media like BBC, RFA, VOA. Sometimes they have to compromise their editorial standard in news reporting, but also the inside local media who are like chicken in a basket. They are allowed to report and write, but only within the frame of their work. So this is something that I just would like to point out and answer that there are some limited foreign media continue to allow to operate inside the country, but they are limited. And third, I want to also I think thanks Gwen, because of the legal issue that she raised is very important, because this is an issue that we are facing, and we're going to have more challenges as a lot of reporters and journalists, and editors, and media houses are coming into the exiles and some locations, some well-known location, where they will have a lot of issues they're going to face, continue to exist and operate in these countries, including Thailand, where I think the legal support is important. And lastly, I think looking at the Thai Journalists Association and Myanmar Press Council collaboration, I think we need to work a lot of collaboration between the Thailand and the Thai journalists who would like to collaborate with the Burmese reporter and journalists who left come here looking for a lot of legal help and assistance and other challenging issues in the country, as well as, of course, with the ASEAN issue, because Cambodia is now currently a chair. I think we should be seeing a lot more collaboration between the Burmese journalists and the Cambodian journalists, but I still don't know how. As Gwen pointed out, I think we are all too busy, and we are too busy with our, and also the environment is getting more and more unfriendly, more and more, the rise of authoritarian regime everywhere. And as the collapse of CPR, I think we need to have more, collaboration, but we need at manager level, not journalists and editors, or not me, but someone, organization that will help us to glue to each other and stick to each other so that we can work on other issues, important issues in the region, I think.
Thank you, Aung. Because others, all of you have discussed the possibility of collaboration, but I was thinking maybe Stephen can add a little bit more on the thoughts of how to fight the common threats and what kind of connection news organization can have together.
I think Aung and Gwen mentioned about Southeast Asia Press Alliance, SIPA. I got a soft spot for SIPA because Malaysiakini was set up with their help when 22 years ago. So they've been around for a long time. Unfortunately, they did not manage to continue. They had to fall, I think, 5-6 years ago. So that's unfortunate. I think we really need to have a similar organization set up like that, because as Aung said, and as what Gwen said, we are all very busy people. We have our own news report, and our focus is on that. It would be great to have, an organization, or at least, a couple of people who can actually coordinate, among ourselves. Whenever there's a need for us to come together to release a statement, for instance, that person is able to contact all of us, immediately, and get, the statement signed, and will be able to send out that statement to around the world, so that people are alerted about what is happening, say, for instance, in Myanmar or in Cambodia and so on. So that is important, and I think that is something very lacking. And also, it's not just in terms of getting statement to be written and getting it signed, but also I think there's a need for legal support as well. Many of the organizations out there are really under attack. Governments are, they're coming out with all sorts of laws, and they're using them to actually go after journalists as well as media organizations. So there is, we are being inundated by not just, the charges, but also, defamation suits and all that. It is very costly. We need to hire lawyers to defend us. And therefore, there has to be a need to, number one, train the lawyers also about press freedom and how to defend press freedom, and journalists as well as media organization. But on the other hand, also raise money for such legal costs.
Thank you, Stephen. Because you raised the issue of collaborating with the lawyers and training the lawyers, I think I would like to ask Chay about this, because in the Philippines, you've just, with like 100 organizations, launched a collaboration to fact check and raise the facts among all people towards the presidential election. I want to ask, beyond the just a journalist collaboration, do you see a need for a connection with the other experts within and outside the country?
Yeah, we launched recently #Facts First PH, and this we brought together, I think, over 100 organizations, and there are different levels of people and groups that are involved. So of course there's media, journalists, and then there are groups from academia as well, and lawyers, because as you had mentioned, we certainly need legal assistance from the lawyers. And what's great about the presence of the lawyers is that they recognize the importance of journalists. They say journalists cannot defend themselves, so lawyers have to do their role as well and help in the defense of journalists. And then on top of that are civil society organizations, other NGOs who also value press freedom. So what the objective really of this coalition, if I may call it that, is to produce fact checks, so that as we know, there's so much information on social media. It's just really been a deluge, and small organizations cannot do it by themselves. So there has to be more people, more groups who are actively involved in the effort. And we'll see how, of course, this has to be coordinated, just like any big group. And we're in the process of fine-tuning workflows and pinpointing who will be accountable and who will be in charge.
Thank you, Chay. Because Sothoeuth is also a non-governmental organization as well as a media, I think I would like to add and ask Sothoeuth if he has ideas because of the scarcity of journalists in your country in some way, are there rooms and for collaboration between media, journalists and other organizations, civil society organizations and NGOs, like, for example, in the Philippines, that was fact-checking, but in other areas as well?
Okay, yeah, in Cambodia, actually, now CCIM, we are also a member of what we call Digital Rights Working Group, because we set up the group after there are some concerning law and regulations set up by the government. Like from next month, they will start implementing what they call National Internet Gateway, which means from our understanding is that all the internet traffic from in the country and also from international will go through a national gateway. This is very concerning from the technical perspective, and also from the human rights defender. You know, because this is what we learned from the technical team, that with the National Internet Gateway, the government might be able to, like, surveillance or like also disconnect or filter content on the internet. So this will affect heavily on our fundamental freedom. And the way that our group work is that we would, all the member, we have our core member, we would take turn to lead or coordinate the meeting. So and this is we are still in the early stage, and we do not have any concrete funding, but each member would just use the available budget to support the work of the groups. So I'm not sure if maybe we can adapt this approach and we can like start it from that way, and each member of the group can take turn to coordinate or call for the meeting. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sothoeuth. So we're coming to the end of this webinar. I know there's so much more to talk about and questions. There are questions, but we're running out of time, I'm sorry. So I would like to ask all of you each to share with us your final thoughts, way forward, including, because there is a question about what can, again, international organizations and civil society groups, what can they do? So if you could include in your final thoughts what the media can do, but also if there are things that you want as last message to say to the international community as well, what from the media point of view, your thoughts. So it's a broad subject, but can I call on Gwen first?
Right, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad to have one more opportunity, because one point I did want to make is also in this new media landscape, largely as a result of the pandemic, but also politics and some of things like the crisis in Myanmar plays into it. But I think there's a whole new generation of young journalists who are not backed up by full organizations, particularly, and also you've got mainstream media, both Asian but particularly Western, really radically reforming the way it does things. Like even the BBC and others is hiring local stringers to go and take video. They're doing a lot of things on Zoom and you know, interviews, and so the whole media landscape has reformed. And I think some of the bigger, more formal organizations haven't kept quite up with it. But there's a great opportunity here to give work to very deserving journalists, well, particularly I think ones who fled Myanmar, but also right through the region and in Cambodia, etc. Even like to file things like bits of video or photographs. But I think this is something we haven't really got our heads around yet. And old-fashioned mainstream media tends to see citizen journalists or bloggers as more of a threat or an annoyance. But actually there's a lot, I've really respected some of the work being done by some of these little freelance journalists who come out of Myanmar and they've been working on their own. So I would just make that point, that I think we should all be more open to, you know, to providing opportunities for that.
Thank you, Gwen. Can I go to Stephen to share with us your last thoughts? Your microphone?
Yes, thank you, Kimiko. I know that the situation in Southeast Asia involving talking about press freedom is bleak. You know, it wasn't like this 10, 15 years ago. It looks a little bit brighter then, but the situation has gone a little bit to the dark side, so to speak. And almost every country in Asia, in Southeast Asia in particular, are facing problems. Apart from perhaps Indonesia, I think Indonesia is the only one bright spark there. But even if you know a little bit about Indonesia, they have their own problems. And I think, you know, but I just would like to say that, you know, having heard, you know, my colleagues from elsewhere, from Philippines, from Aung from Myanmar, and you know, so from Cambodia and all that, it is, you know, while the situation of press freedom in Asia is not so good, it's weak, but I think, you know, the resistance to, you know, to that is strong, and I think we should continue to build on that. And it's not a time to be disheartened by the situation, but it should strengthen us, and we should somehow work together. So in that sense, I would like to thank the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, as well as the you know, the Foreign Press Committee of Japan, to bring us together. And I think this kind of dialogue should continue. And it would be great somehow from this we'll be able to find a way to really solidify our you know, find a way to get us to work together, hopefully through an organization, if possible, if not from, you know, through other means. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. Sothoeuth, can I ask you to share your thoughts next?
Okay, thank you, Kimiko. Yeah, like our colleagues say, even though the environment for the media and also freedom of expression in the region is developing in a negative way, but we need to keep continue doing our jobs. This can still it will reflect the importance of our role, and especially the journalists' roles in fighting against the whatever they want to silence us. So let's see it not the problem, but it should be another challenge for us to challenge ourselves to improve to the next level. So by working together, I think, and especially for getting the support from one another, we'll be stronger, and the challenge will be overcome soon.
Thank you, Sothoeuth. And may I ask Chay next to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up on the point earlier made about the need for an organization that would be similar to SIPA. We need that, obviously. There should be maybe headquarters set up elsewhere with a secretariat who will coordinate everything and bring all of us together, because I agree, all of us are busy with our day-to-day operations. We need to survive financially and just put out the next edition or stories to be published one after the other. So it will be difficult for us journalists to be deeply involved in this. Second, maybe just a warning from our own experience, because we've been experiencing this. We're an online, just like Malaysiakini, but we've been under attack. We've been, these past few weeks, a succession of DDoS attacks. And we know that this is really an attempt to affect our operations. It slows down the production of content. And this is one area. Technology is an important area also where we will need support digital security. What are the options? What are the things that we should know about? And are there companies, are there groups who can support media organizations that are under attack digitally? So yeah, that's just an important point, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chay. And lastly, Aung, could I ask you for your last comments?
I want to thank you all for inviting me. I think you all made a great contribution, so I don't need to say much and that. But I want to, I just want to share. If I don't speak, it will last for at least 5 or 10 minutes. So I have to try to limit myself. And when I went back to Burma or Myanmar for the last 10 years, and we have different kinds of investors or donors who come to us. And it's ups and downs in terms of trying to survive your operation, your mission inside the country. It's not easy, and you had a one foot in, one foot out strategy to keep surviving your work, both inside and outside, keeping your editorial independence. Then there are new donors and new thinking, talking about sustainable development and income generating and monetizations and all kinds of things. But all these are all gone. And, after 10 years, and all the donors or whatever, the international supporter, they came back to ask me after the coup, shall we talk about marketing? Shall we talk about monetization? Shall we talk about digital marketing? And I said, my obvious answer is, that there are a lot of projects comes to you. They force you to work on a lot of different issues, and you are getting thinner and thinner because you overstretch and work on different issues. You can't really focus on what your main job, which is to report and to work on your daily evidence, what is most important. So I told them it's straightforward that we are still alive, at least a lot of independent organizations and media groups, including the Irrawaddy, one of the top ones. We still survive and keep working. So I think at least you should be thankful, and we should be thankful to ourselves that we are still survive. Not only that, we still keep publishing this most important time in, as I said, a moment in history that I think we keep providing all the necessary information, images, and our colleagues inside the country are taking a huge risk. If you raise a camera and you'll be caught, arrested, or shot, or killed. And if you are going out on the streets, you have to bring a clean form. We call it clean form, a white form, which is there's no Facebook, nothing. So if they stop you, then check, and you have a clean form, so they won't arrest you. And at home, you keep that you call it busy form or work form. Or we call it dirty form, which is where you do everything there. Your all your images and text and information are cut there. So it's really tough for people and reporters inside the country working. Also those who are come to the border areas, joining with the groups on the borders and trying to get the information and release. And they all need the support, and those who are now trying to live in difficult circumstances in Thailand. So it's all need the help. And also lastly, what I want to say happily is at least the coup is not completed. They are not successful. Even after 1 year, it will be successful. So that is important to see from also from the regional perspective, how the regional reporters like us and then Stephen Gan and Chay, everybody, how we going to collaborate, raise the issue. Because of Myanmar issue is not domestic issue, it is a regional issues. It brings instability to the region. So it's everybody's problem. So that is where I think we would love to see more collaboration in terms of educating your constituencies and your audience and your readers, because we all are not so small, but media, we have an influence, and we can tell our story and share a story of what is happening in Myanmar related to the ASEAN, which is quite important in terms of, I think, collaboration. I think. Thank you all.
Thank you, Aung. So as Aung said, what's happening in each country is something to do with all of us. It's not just one country. It is not just regional. It relates to all of us. And I would like to remember and continue the conversation, what we had today. But thank you so much. I'm sorry we have gone along a little bit long, but I would like to ask the audience, maybe virtually, to give thanks and applause to the 5 journalists and who they represent, the journalists across the region who is working on the ground now. So thank you very much. I don't think we can see the... So thank you, and thank you, audience, for staying with us until the end. So let's hope to continue this conversation. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Kimiko. Bye.
Bye.
Bye,
you.
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
See you next time.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Ingalaba.